museum kids! I love history, which is likely pretty obvious seeing as I work at a museum, but the thing that got me hooked on history in the first place was ancient Egypt. Massive pyramids, captivating stories about gods and goddesses that were sometimes seen as half human, half animals, mummified corpses, a long, colorful history that stretched over thousands of years. What's not to love? But did you know that our city, Niagara Falls, Ontario, has a connection to ancient Egypt? It all starts with this man, Thomas Barnett. Thomas Barnett opened the Niagara Falls Museum in 1831. This is considered by many to be Canada's oldest museum, and it was located right near the brink of the Niagara Falls. His museum was known as a cabinet of curiosities and was filled with amazing things to see. Over the years, he collected all sorts of specimens from various cultures around the world, as well as objects from nature. He sent his son Sidney Barnett traveling far and wide to purchase these items. Sidney traveled to Egypt 3 times around 1860, purchasing all sorts of ancient Egyptian artifacts, including mummies. At least one of the mummies he purchased came from the Ahmed el-Rasoul family that had discovered a secret tomb jammed full of coffins, mummies, and treasures. The tomb was found in Deir el-Bahri, and they kept its existence secret for many years as they very slowly sold some of the treasures found within. Eventually, they were found out, and the government of Egypt stepped in to preserve what they could. This tomb, now known as TT320, is very special. It wasn't one person's tomb. It was a secret hiding spot created in 933 BCE. That's almost 3,000 years ago. Tomb robberies were very common, even in ancient Egypt, so a huge amount of mummies and treasures were taken from their original tombs and all placed in this one secret place in hopes of protecting them from future robberies. In this tomb, many royal mummies were found, including a coffin that was labeled with Ramses I. Only problem is, the mummy was missing. Let's now fast forward to the year 1999 and back to the Niagara Falls Museum. The museum itself was moved to a few different locations and sold to various owners, but what remained were all the beautiful treasures from Sidney's travels, including the mummies. The final location of the museum was here. Nowadays, this building houses Bird Kingdom. In 1999, the museum closed and the entire collection of artifacts was sold to a collector named Billy Jamieson. The ancient Egyptian collection was eventually sold to the Carlos Museum in Atlanta, and with the help of Emory University, they wanted to learn more about the mummies. Who were they? One of the mummies was beautifully preserved. Clearly, they were either very rich or very special, because the embalmers, that's the name of the people who mummified the dead, really took their time and did an amazing job preserving the body. The mummy had a few clues as to who they were. The tissue could be dated so we would know roughly how old the mummy was, which was roughly 3,300 years old. This process is called radiocarbon dating. The next clue was the mummy's arms. They are crossed over his chest. From the time period this mummy was created, that meant only one thing, that they were royalty. Later in Egyptian history, all mummies are found like that, but because of the age of this mummy, we know that he's a king, or as they are known in ancient Egypt, a pharaoh. The university then X-rayed the mummy to get a clear picture of their facial structure. Our facial features, like the shape of our chin, cheeks, and nose, is something that is passed down from your parents. That's why people will say you look like your mom or your dad. Historians compare the facial features of mummies to sometimes connect them to a family line. Luckily, Egypt already had lots of mummies from the royal line around 3,300 years ago, and wouldn't you know it, they look very similar to this unknown mummy. They have the same nose. With all the evidence piled up, it was pretty clear who this special mummy was: Ramses I. Ramses I was the founding pharaoh of the 19th dynasty. This dynasty or family of rulers brought Egypt into a period of stability and prosperity. That means we had a famous pharaoh right here in Niagara Falls, Ontario for almost 140 years. The Carlos Museum in Atlanta then repatriated Ramses I back to the country of Egypt. Repatriation in the museum world is the returning of a priceless artifact to the culture or country of origin. It recognizes that an object of that cultural value deserves to be with the culture that created it. Ramses I flew back to Egypt in style in October 2003 and was greeted with a 21-gun salute upon touchdown. Now you can find him resting in the Luxor Museum. How does this all connect with the Niagara Falls History Museum, my museum? In our collection, we may not have mummies, but we do have some objects from Sidney Barnett and his time in Egypt. This includes letters home he wrote from Egypt, receipts from his travels, and my personal favorite, a handwritten lecture Sidney gave in Niagara Falls in 1862 on his travels in Egypt. In part of the lecture, Sidney describes the Valley of the Kings, a place in the desert where ancient pharaohs were buried for over 500 years. Let me share a bit of it with you. We pass up through the valley where the blue vault of heaven seems to rest upon the naked rocks, and every stone reflects the fierce heat of the sun like a furnace. Into the desert quietness, the solemn stillness of the valley of the tombs of the kings. Here we find tombs, then entrances to which are small and unpretending, and the straight passage leading downwards and into the mountain is cut through the solid rock. The sides of the walls and ceiling completely covered with hieroglyphics and paintings of figures, explanatory of the life of the ancients, of the offering to the gods, and the life of the king. I think that's enough history from our museum for now. Let's make something to remember the ancient Egyptians. Sidney described the walls of the tombs in the Valley of the Kings as covered with hieroglyphics. Do you know what those are? Egyptian hieroglyphics is the system of writing that was used more than 5,000 years ago in ancient Egypt. It's very different from our English alphabet because there are more than 800 different symbols a scribe would need to use to write. Some symbols represent entire words or ideas, while some symbols represented a specific sound in a word. Our alphabet just represents letters, and we combine those letters to make sounds. Sometimes we have letters in words that aren't pronounced, like the letter E at the end of the word cantaloupe. Before we can write our name, we first need to remove any silent letters from our name, like the E at the end of Suzanne. And if you have any double letters, like the two N's in Suzanne, then you need to remove one of those letters. The next thing we need to do is look at this table of hieroglyphic sounds from our friends at the Royal Ontario Museum. Like I said before, these symbols represent sounds, not necessarily just letters. Some of our letters make multiple sounds, like the E sound in eagle, or the eh sound in elf. Both are the same letter for us, the letter E, but in ancient Egypt, these two sounds were represented by different symbols. Your next job in writing your name is to slowly sound out your name and find those sounds in this chart. Feel free to pause this video now to record the sounds and their corresponding symbols to write your name. Great job! You've written out your name in hieroglyphics. Now you can add one of these fancy-looking loops around your name called a cartouche. This cartouche tells everyone reading your name that you are royalty. Thanks for coming on a journey of the Niagara Falls History Museum's collection and ancient Egypt with me. Join us for more fun historical content on our History at Home playlist on YouTube. Thanks and have a great day.